Hello fellow egoists! Today we'll be looking at how Isagi's prophecy of Kaiser becoming a naked king might come to be. The video will be broken down into 4 following parts. First, fragile ego, then cross-flow, polished talent, and finally, the naked king. Now let's get into it, shall we? For this part, we'll be looking at Kaiser and how his ego has been shown to be pretty fragile. Note that I'm saying fragile. Kaiser seems to have a big ego, but one that's easily broken down. There are multiple things that show us this, the first instance being when Chris Prince baits Kaiser into a 1v1 by taunting him. And you could say that taunts usually work when there is some truth inside of them. Here, Chris taunts Kaiser by saying that he's a coward who only aims for weaker opponents, a superstar who can't do anything by himself. While Kaiser does indeed take the 1v1 and eventually loses, the important thing is that we see a difference between the egoists of Blue Lock and Kaiser. Where Blue Lock with their strong egos will directly aim for the number 2, or at least be eager to face him, instead Kaiser flees. The best example to show that difference is Isagi wanting to face Rin in the second selection. Here Kaiser did the exact opposite and instead wanted nothing to do with Prince until he got taunted. Another argument and a parallel between Isagi and Kaiser is the scene where Kaiser explains why he joined the Neo-Egoist League, or NEL for short, in the first place. He thinks that in Bastard Munchen, and we'll just call that Bastard for short, a Noah-centric team, he won't be able to showcase himself as the best striker in the world. But what did Isagi do in that same situation when he joined Bastard, a Kaiser-centric system? He created a path using everything he had. Another thing is that Kaiser likes to destroy the hopes of others, but we have to note that he only talks about people weaker than him. Evolving players, fading superstars, etc., but no one on his level or higher. So here we see that Chris Prince's stunt did have some truth to it. 2 points that are really interesting are Kaiser's morning routine and good luck charm. Kaiser, after waking up, talks to himself, smiles at himself and puts himself in the mindset that nothing is impossible, while looking at himself butt naked in the mirror. As for his good luck charm, he strokes his blue rose tattoo as though tightening a noose around his neck. So with these points, we see that Kaiser's ego is seemingly about doing the impossible, but his behavior isn't really something you'd expect out of someone with the confidence to do that. If anything, his morning routine screams insecurities, which isn't necessarily bad if he tries to get rid of them, just that it doesn't fit the persona he's trying to have. We also have the cover of volume 19 where we see Kaiser with what looks like a glass chain. Whereas characters tend to have metal or steel chains with varying heights and thickness, here Kaiser has a thick chain but what seems like glass, a pretty fragile material. And finally, the color page of chapter 169. The important thing is that the sentence written on it is, to quote, "Ego is the only weapon that lets you fight back, the haves and haves not." So here we get the comparison of people with strong ego that lets them fight back and those who don't. With who in the picture? Isagi and Kaiser. With Isagi we know that indeed he has the ego needed to fight back. So is Kaiser a have not? And so, with all this, we have seen that Kaiser is shown to have a pretty fragile ego, or at least insecurities that seem to stop him from facing adversity the way Isagi does. After all, he has been totally mad at the fact that he didn't score by himself in the Ubers match, even though he scored one of the best goals in the entire series. And also, he doesn't seem to understand Isagi's thought process and enjoyment of facing obstacles. With all this, I hope I managed to convince you that Kaiser seems to have a big problem in terms of ego. And so now, let's get into the second part. There isn't a clear definition of crossflow given in the manga, so we'll go with the following definition. Crossflow is an interaction of 2 characters having an objective that not only pushes them into flow, but also intersects. The best example of that being Ryo and Nagi in the Munchen City match, where both of them went into flow while having a goal that intersects. For Nagi it was about beating Isagi, and for Ryo it was about making Nagi the best striker in the world. Isagi also calls that chemical reactions, though chemical reactions are more so about the cross of ego, as for example, Isagi and Baro's chemical reaction is not always in flow. Now that we've defined crossflow, we may ask ourselves, why is it important for our theory? Well, let's look at some examples to slowly discover why. The first crossflow interactions we see in the NEL was Kunigami's goal in the Barsha match. During the match we got to hear a bit about Kunigami's wildcard backstory, though not totally. For the actual goal itself, we have Isagi who decided to challenge Kunigami, forcing him to tap into his hero flow. With this goal, Isagi managed to create a place for Kunigami and himself into the regulars of Bastard, but also forced Kunigami into his hero persona once again. The second crossflow interaction is the Ryo and Nagi 5-stage fake volley, though it isn't relevant to our theory, so we'll just leave it alone. The first cross-flow interaction is with Yukimiya in the Munchen City match. Once again we get to see his backstory before the match. As for the interaction itself, here Isagi once again does the assist, but this time to surpass Kaiser as a playmaker. Though for Yuki, this pass forces him to evolve his ego, to say to himself that he will forge his destiny himself, so while he'll still do his best to die with his ideal, he won't let a so-called destiny just rule his life. And finally, while it hasn't happened yet, we will surely see a cross-flow interaction between Isagi and Hiori. We see that Hiori follows the formula of cross-flow interactions in the nail after all. We get his backstory, and in it we see what is currently wrong with his ego, or rather his lack of ego. With this in mind, the final goal will surely be once again with Isagi for a cross-flow interaction, with Hiori evolving his ego like Kunigami and Yukimiya did. This time, Hiori awakening a love for football, doing an assist to Isagi for Isagi to surpass Kaiser as the ace of Bastard Munchen. If you wonder why I think that Hiori will assist instead of scoring himself, you can watch my video about Hiori's ego, which I'll link in the description. But to summarize a bit, we've seen that cross-flow interactions in Bastard are always about the final goal of the match, with Isagi forcing a challenge onto the player who he has a cross-flow interaction with. Through that challenge, the player in question gains a stronger ego and sets in stone their relationship with Isagi. With this in mind, you might start to see what I'm going for with Kaiser. Though, before getting into that, let's take a look at the enigmatic PXG. In this part, we'll take a look at what might be PXG's philosophy. No one can really guess what it accurately is, but we can guess one thing: it's deeply related to having players develop their original brand. The best example being the famous supernova of football, Loki. Players are described as up-and-comers, while also talking about attracting money. And what attracts money? Special players who entertain with their unique playstyle. Loki with his god speed, for example, is for sure a player that attracts cameras to him through his flashy and speedy plays. The way PXG has been described and the players who went there outside of Nanase though, all seem to have a really distinct talent, and the way they will grow will probably be deeply related to developing their own brand around it. The best example being Rin and Shido, whose playstyles are as flashy as it gets, but that haven't been able to structure it in a sense. So PXG's philosophy will surely be about taking the biggest talent of the player and developing it to the extreme, making it so overwhelming that the player can showcase himself through it and develop their playstyle around it. Kind of similarly to Munchen, though for Munchen it was about developing your talent through physical abilities, while PXG will probably be about the playstyle itself centered around the talent. The big thing with each team's philosophy is that Isagi devours them. He has obviously been tainted by the rationality of Bastard. He always aims for goals that he can reproduce and never goes for things outside of his current skill set, as shown by his pass to Yukimiya in the Munchen match where he could have been stubborn and forced a shot, but held the rationality deep inside his mind. For Barca, he adopted Lavigno's philosophy by awakening the concept of metavision after watching Kaiser, then put his own twist on it via the protagonist feeling piece. For Munchen, he developed his body before the match against Ubers to be able to use metavision to its fullest. So with Ubers, he will surely take the work philosophy of it and put his own twist to it. And for PXG, we will surely see something similar. Though what is Isagi's talent that he hasn't been using to its fullest? His senses following his original ego, which I've made a video about. In it, we see the potential of Isagi's ego and how strong it will surely become as time goes on. So with all this, we've gotten all the pieces needed to guess what Kaiser's future as the Naked King will be. Let's get into it! Using all the points shown, we know one thing: whoever gets a backstory before the PXG match will get a cross-flow with Isagi. As you might have guessed, the main candidate for now is Kaiser. The Ubers match is about who will become the King of Bastard. Using the cross-flow formula, we can guess that Bastard will win the match with Hiori doing an assist to Isagi, making him the new ace of Bastard and potentially letting all 10 current Blue Lock players come into the field with only Kaiser left. An emperor who lost his empire. The Naked King who lost his clothing of one. All of this by a person who he thought was a simple clown, but actually a ruler in disguise. A divine being who he angered and through that got divine punishment. As with all the characters who were candidates before him, Kaiser is in a dire situation with his goal during the Neo-Egoist League being in Jeopardy. For Kunigami, it was following his own way of dominance. For Yuki, it was dying with his ideal, and for Hiori, it's to be able to continue being at Blue Lock and escape his home. In Kaiser's case, he will have so far not been able to prove his worth or devour Isagi, and by doing so won't be able to get an offer out of Bastard. he will have failed to even keep his own empire afloat. Now, doesn't that seem to be the best environment to enter flow? As for Isagi in the PXG match, we can expect him to devour PXG's philosophy during the match. But what is the striker's brand? Their playstyle following their original ego. One of Isagi's main strengths when he is in the zone is controlling the field with his godlike aura, getting such a strong presence on the field that he makes fear and doubt enter everyone's mind. The best example being Barrow in the second selection. Isagi's presence was so strong that he even forced the so-called king to bow down to him. Another example is when Isagi first awakened Metavision. His aura was so strong that Corona blurted out, "Damn that ego," while seeing Isagi. He was totally baffled from the change in Isagi's demeanor. With this, you might be able to guess what I'm getting. We will get Kaiser entering a cross-flow state with Isagi, both of them having an objective that will make them head for the hottest place on the field, potentially having an anti-chemical reaction where they both devour each other, but as Kaiser gets the ball, PXG's defense overwhelms him. Though in that moment, he sees a certain thing. Isagi following his original ego with an aura that overwhelms Kaiser. A crossroad for Kaiser. At the breaking point of his fragile ego, what will he do? There are of course two options. The first would be for Kaiser to submit to Isagi, having his ego break and feed Isagi to a point where Isagi overpowers Kaiser not only by taking his empire, but also by taking his ego and breaking it. While in true despair after this defeat, Kaiser would then go into the U20 World Cup with only one goal, defeating Isagi and taking back his pride. With a rage fueling his mind, Kaiser would destroy all the insecurities he has by only focusing on defeating Isagi. Though that seems unlikely, as even when wearing no clothes, a king stays a king. And to fully embrace that notion, Kaiser would fight through all the despair, accepting that he isn't the sole leading actor of football, fighting through his insecurities even if he isn't the undefeated emperor he once was. He will stay an emperor and shoot the most powerful Kaiser impact we've ever seen, embracing a new ego and making the impossible possible. With this goal, Kaiser will have been reborn with a strong ego that can fight through any situation. God's chosen emperor will have finally destroyed his biggest obstacle to becoming the best, himself. With this, Kaiser, while yes, having been reborn, will become stronger than ever. Knowing his personality, he will still acknowledge Isagi and feel a revenge for what happened. With this, the two kings of Bastard will have acknowledged each other and resolved their conflict on the ultimate stage for a U20 striker, the World Cup. A fight to decide finally who is the best U20 striker in the world will begin. Which one of those two will surpass the other and impose his dominance on the world of football? The savior of Japanese football, heaven's sent child and all-seeing god Isagi Yoichi, or the naked king reborn with an ego of titanium, the one who makes the impossible possible and whose blue roses will grow and invade the world of football, Mikhail Kaiser. Only time will tell, but this fight will for sure resonate through the ages. And with this, we finished the video. The Kaiser-Isagi rivalry is honestly shaping up to become one of my favorites of all time and just in general in any piece of fiction. I'm hyped to see the conclusion of their story not only in the Nail but also in the U20 World Cup and hopefully in the actual World Cup. The rivalry is something I could have gotten way more into, but it deserves its own video, and for that reason I tried to focus the best on the Naked King prophecy as to not diverge. No matter what, even if those two theories don't hold true, I still had a lot of fun making the video and I hope you had a blast watching it. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for my next video where we'll analyze the formula of the Neo Egoist League, and after that we'll make a video about Sai Itoshi, the misunderstood genius. I hope you enjoyed once again the video, and have a great one, fellow egoists.